And welcome to the second GM's Workshop.
Yeah. Yeah. Welcome.
Wow, 2 nights in a row
I
for me
like
on Twitch.
I didn't warm myself up, I guess, and prepare myself. I was like, "Oh, welcome."
Well, here we are, and this is our second in a series of it's kind of like GM advice, but less GM advice and more just getting our hands dirty and doing the actual GM prep with all of you here to influence where we go with that. And we'll be making up the stats and whatnot. Last time was our first one, and the idea was that we would come up with a run idea together and flesh that out. And this time the goal is to design a Nemesis.
Nemesis, is that how you pronounce it? Nemesis?
Nemesis works just as well, I think. I think Nemesis sounds more, I don't know, threatening, dangerous.
Sounds like a nematode to me, but
fair enough. So I guess you could say designing a villain, but I think Nemesis is more interesting and appropriate to a Shadowrun campaign. This is someone that your runners are going to encounter and probably mess with their plans or piss them off, and they're going to get angry at your runners and will cause problems for them, and it will have some sort of a confrontation or difficulties that may result in various fallout with contacts or other NPCs, much like how things kind of turned out with the Blood Mage in the Arcology actual play, or in Bobby's case, Mr. Mayhem. It's kind of the campaign ending guy.
That's my most recent experience with designing people like this, I suppose. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is a lot more than designing a character with just designing up an NPC with some nasty badass stats that's going to make it for a good boss fight. Because one thing I've personally learned about Shadowrun is generally not a good role-playing game for satisfying boss fights. I don't think.
I would 100% agree. If you go into trying to design some sort of a boss fight, you may have already failed.
Right. The challenge is more about getting the drop on or the right situation or arranging things behind the scenes or whatever schemes you come up with to face them down. And then, of course, there's usually the satisfying, combat climax, of course. But, like most combats in Shadowrun, it's something that's going to be over with in a combat turn or two. And your PC is probably going to one-shot your cleverly crafted badass NPC. There's some ways to kind of avoid that. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the in-play ways of helping to make your Nemesis seem more challenging and scary and keep them from getting just offed immediately, or what happens if they do get offed. But I think we better start off with something like a concept. This would be just your general idea of what this Nemesis is. It's an NPC, a he or she or it or them. What kind of ideas do we want to go with? What kind of a Nemesis or Nemesis do you want to see us create?
Yeah. Hey there, Palmer JW. Hey. We're taking suggestions. If you have not tuned in to, this is only the second time we're doing it, so it's likely that you're listening for the first time to our Gamemasters workshop. But the idea here is not that it's that we share tips and tricks and stuff with you guys, but a lot of this is that we are working together with you guys to do it. It's a workshop, right? We're all getting in and doing the dirty work together to get practice doing this. And at the same time, we kind of wax philosophic, I guess, about what kind of things we like to think about when we do this, provided that we have worthwhile experience, I guess. The point being that you guys definitely make suggestions to us. What are we looking at? Do you have some suggestions maybe to get people started? Maybe some ideas that they can choose from or come up with their own?
Well, I guess Oz had sent us a message before saying that he would love to see us create a Blood Mage. And so that might be fun. Blood Mages are certainly great fodder for villains. and a nemesis for your player characters.
Right. I guess sometimes you have to think, what type of nemesis are you even thinking about? Is this going to be a scheming kind of person, is in some kind of way? Are they connected to a corporation? Are they connected to some sort of other organization? Like in what capacity are they going to be?
I think by default you should, unless you have a very good reason to go with a different approach. I think a nemesis should almost always be a plot or schemer.
Yeah, it feels like that should be the case, right? Like what kind of nemesis is it if all they're doing is just accidentally running into you and then fighting? It just it feels like that's the natural way to go. I agree.
And Armada 1, the question is explosions. I would say yes, explosions would be my answer.
Yeah, usually that is my answer as well.
We'll include that in the techniques in the document here. I've got a little document that I've got started at Google Drive. Let's see here. I can go in there and type under one of the main techniques, explosions. It doesn't really fit for the concept, but it might help us steer towards what concept we'll go with, though just about anyone can use explosions, different kinds of explosions.
Yeah. So, absent any suggestions, and hello to Malakan. Absent any suggestions, I guess we could go with some sort of Blood Mage concept.
Okay.
That's kind of an easy villain, right?
Blood Mages are... So, I guess if just to be clear on what Blood Mages are, a Blood Mage is a magician, usually someone who's capable of casting spells and using alchemy and summoning spirits, who has picked up a pretty dark metamagic talent that allows them to use blood magic. And what that means is they got to cut somebody or themselves, and the energy from doing that can be used to avoid drain or make spells more powerful or summon particularly wicked different kinds of spirits. It's usually involves someone beginning to look at people as tools or objects or consumables.
Yeah, right.
And it's addictive, and basically the more nasty the act is of the sacrifice, the more power you get.
Yes, exactly.
So there are very few friendly blood mages.
Yeah, not in my experience.
As technology is particularly famous for being a source of blood mages, it's not actually illegal there if you're licensed through the corporation. But yes, a blood mage is someone who is a magician, obsessed with power, addicted to dealing harm and using it to power and fuel their magic. I think megalomania probably fits with this sort of villain. They're likely to be vindictive, I imagine. Plenty to mine with a blood mage.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what sort of ideas besides the obvious, I guess, come to you with approaching a blood mage, Bobby?
Well, the obvious being somehow connected to as technology, I suppose. That's the first thing that always pops into my head, but I think that's a natural place to go. A blood mage is, I guess I'm filled with feelings of like, one of the first places I go to next after deciding, and maybe even before I decide specifically like where we are with the blood mages, what is the purpose of this nemesis, or what are they scheming for? It's hard for me to imagine who they are or what they are if I don't know why they are. You know what I mean?
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about what's the main goal. I mean, besides gaining power and using blood magic and doing mean things to people in the process, I mean, what is the end that the blood mage is working towards, or what is maybe just an important project to them?
Yeah. And again, these are questions for you guys, chat room. We will continue to talk on and on and on, but we're watching your suggestions. So definitely throw them out there.
Oh, a Toxic Blood Mage. I love the idea of a Toxic Amada One and Palmer combining their two ideas. Amazonia is a small country in South America that lost a war against Az technology. What if someone is driven to hatred and vengeance against Az technology, and they're an Amazonian? So we have a toxic Amazonian blood mage who would probably be shunned by the powerful magic people who typically populate Amazonia, so they'd have to be very careful and sneaky. What do you think?
I think that I like having little twists on the normal, and that toxic addition there. It makes it challenging to put one together. I feel like I guess there's nothing. I would have never thought to put those two together, but I guess there's nothing that says you can't have a toxic blood.
And I love the idea of kind of going against the stereotype, a little bit opposite of that. Someone whose main goal is vengeance against Az technology, but they've observed enough of their use of Blood Mage to have picked it up for themselves and now use it as a tool against them.
Yeah, that's like what Brownski in the chat is saying there. It's along those lines. Personal details. Crawled his way out of the Barrens or anywhere similar to that, I guess, and leading the lower caste up against the corpse. That's kind of like what you're. It's along the lines of what you were saying just now. And Brownski, thanks for the subscription.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. I'm still having trouble managing all my different windows here, even though I have two screens. Maybe it's because I have so many screens. All right. So loved one was kidnapped and experimented on. That's a good one. Fight fire with fire. Yes.
Yeah, loved one, kidnapped and experimented on.
Insect spirits can be fun. Maybe that's like another interest of theirs. I don't know.
Well, if it's,
that might complicate things too.
I don't know. I feel like toxic blood mage is good. We don't have to throw in the insect spirits as well.
Sure. Now, I love this being a character that you might potentially be able to empathize with, but the idea of someone who's toxic is that they might originally have been motivated by something more pure, like wanting to protect the environment or save their people. But what they've done has so far twisted their mind that they are really incapable of actually doing anything good, and anything they would seem to try to do good turns to nasty evil through their actions.
Yeah, it's somebody suggested a loved one was kidnapped and experimented on. I don't see. To me, when you if we're going the toxic route, to me, toxic screams a lot more. That they were made. They did not they were not on a path of vengeance or anything, and somehow became toxic. It's that they were being toxic as a product of their environment, and that's what made them go on whatever path that they're on. Now, that's not to say you can't become toxic because you are often, like the classic eco-terrorist turned toxic, or an eco whatever activist turned toxic because of proximity and to these types of environments as well. There's a lot you can do. My head is spinning with all the different ways.
So let's talk about maybe this might be a character who would have a strong connection to a certain area of land that was somehow irreparably or horribly damaged or polluted by Az technology.
I like that.
Possibly in the war.
It's cleaner. It's cleaner. The motivations are clearer too. That's one thing. Speaking of, as we're building this and everything, one thing we like to do is talk about how to generally speaking come up with these guys and use them as well in your campaigns. And one thing I like when I'm building NPCs in general context, but especially these types of big bads that you might use, is I personally like having them with more clear-cut motivations. It makes it easier for me to jump in and out of that character and remember who they are and why I've got them, and why I'm using them against or in this story and stuff like that. It's a personal preference of mine. I think it's I always give it as a tip for being able to switch between people and everything. So I like having clear-cut motivations is what I'm saying, I guess.
Certainly. So as a toxic person, something that'll help with that is picking a mentor spirit as well. I think going with one of those is going to be useful. There's essentially what like poison style of toxic magicians, and there's radiation versions. What else do we have to pick from? Those are the two main ones that I think of. Oh, mutation is one. Also disease. The toxins one is called Doom.
Right. Now, this is in the toxic stuff is that in Street Grimoire?
At page 86 of Street Grimoire, we've got that there.
All right.
So we've got a Doom, which embodies the desire of toxics to basically kill life. You get a bonus to demolitions or a single combat skill. You get a bonus to combat spells and preparations, and an adept will get a free killing hands power. They get a disadvantage of getting out of or avoiding a fight once it's begun. That sounds kind of cool, along with the explosions in the techniques. So
yeah, we did have explosions as our number one ambiguous suggestion.
And it makes sense from what might happen in the war. Say, as technology uses some horrible poison that they deploy that kills a bunch of life and people, and this person was one of the few, if maybe just the last or only to survive. And maybe they did so by embracing the toxic nature through their what would have been their death. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And Doom makes sense also because, so in Street Grimoire, it specifically talks about Doom as a mentor spirit, saying that it embodies the desire of toxics to bring an end to all life on the planet. And why would that happen? Maybe being in the mire of war, you see two sides that are fighting this battle and war against each other, and the Doom has come and spoken to you and told this Nemesis that this is just the way that humanity is, and the only way to stop this and to stop the sort of spread of this destruction all over the place, like has happened to your homeland, is to do away with all life, because it is an inevitability, and that's the only solution.
So another thing that I thought of with that as well is that maybe everything that they knew and loved has been killed. And so why shouldn't everything else suffer the same fate? But exactly. They're probably mainly focused on as technology, but if they were given to, pursue their goals successfully down as far of a path as they could want, they would eventually want to kill all life on Earth.
Yeah, I like that idea. It's like that sort of, when I think of toxic spirits or toxic shamans and mages and everything, just the toxic tradition, I like to think of very twisted logic. Like it seems almost somehow cogent, but just
at some point it just
stepped in the back. They made a really fatal, like a really flawed logical step, but every other step has been logical. So it's this weird twisted logic that somehow there's balance or justice in making everyone else suffer the same that you have,
All right, so in personal details, I'm putting they're from Amazonia. They lost everyone they loved in the war due to a toxic attack.
Tox attack.
Now they are seeking vengeance. Oh, that's their main goal. I don't have to type it there. What else about them? Became toxic instead of dying when poisoned by as technology.
Yeah. Hey, you. It looks like I'm frozen on the stream. If you click on Skype and then Alt Tab out of that, I think it'll fix that.
Did that do it?
I'll see you in a couple of seconds.
I suppose.
Yeah, it looks like it fixed it.
All right. So I'm picturing someone who's maybe from a tribe rather than an urban area. Amazonia is a lot of dense rainforest, and there are some cities certainly, but there's lots of people who live out in a more tribal environment. It doesn't mean that they're don't know about the outside world or have access to technology, but less of a city kind of thing, trying to live more with the land. Probably revering and being involved with and knowing a number of awakened entities, things like free spirits or the local awakened flora and fauna.
Yeah, it's like a person who was really just minding their own business, and and so is everybody else. It also, when you have it that way, when you kind of frame it that way about who they were, it satisfies that thing that you were saying just a minute ago that you like so much about having villains that are somehow relatable, that you can sympathize with.
Yeah. They seem like someone you might be able to get along with and help pursue their goals until you realize that they're about to poison a whole mall full of people, including women and children. And
you know what that sets this for, Cliff? It sets it up for introducing the Nemesis as a Johnson who has you doing something that, sure, every Shadowrun would be down with sticking it to as technology or Amazonia or something like that.
Oh, okay, so that's one possibility of how to entangle the PCs is make this character a Johnson.
Yeah.
Very good. But we should probably take some more suggestions from our audience here.
Yes, absolutely.
Spirit pact with toxic spirit, maybe. Ally spirit went toxic in the poisoning. Oh, I like that. That would have certainly helped.
That is interpretive chaos.
So I love that. Under minions, let's put toxic ally spirit. That didn't start out toxic.
So for those who might not be familiar, explain what is an ally spirit and what would that mean?
To be honest, I haven't really paid much attention to the ally spirit rules in 5th edition. I had a character with an ally spirit once in 3rd and before, but it's essentially a spirit that you create from yourself using a direct ton of karma, and it's not one that you have to summon anymore. It's tied to you. It can do things for you. You can actually lose control of it, possibly, depending on what happens down the road. But it's very much tied to you, and it can take lots of forms and have different abilities. Usually, their spirit type is somewhat based off of existing spirit types, but it could be all sorts of things.
Yeah. So
they're very, very expensive karma-wise.
Yeah, because it's basically like your spirit buddy BFF, right?
Yes, certainly. Very, very connected, and if a spirit went toxic, that would certainly help tip a magician further down that path.
Yes.
All right. So, as far as the person itself, is this a metahuman or something else? I think we could potentially go with a weird awakened thing, but I think it would certainly make sense to go with a metahuman as well. But it being Amazonia, there's all sorts of different awakened beings that are recognized, so that gives us plenty of possibilities.
So when you say awakened beings, you just mean some other kind of like
a Naga or a human is one suggestion by Palmer. Human makes sense. I mean,
it's quite an original suggestion there, Palmer. Just kidding. Dryad. That's actually the first thing I thought of because
Dryad could be scary.
But, yeah.
Yeah, that also would make sense with the symbiosis of the land. Plus, there's all the layers. This person was just fragging doomed by the war.
Yeah, I actually don't know much about dryads in Shadowrun, but it did. The image popped into my head when we were talking about the forest.
Okay, so let's take that dryad suggestion, because that just makes too much sense. So dryads, if we, I think the details for them are going to be in. What is it? Run faster?
Yes, and let's pull that up. Fortunately, I halfway pulled up these books.
I believe a dryad is a meta variant of an elf, isn't it?
Well, I've got it
And
here. Yes, it is.
I think they're all female.
Mm.
I don't think there are male dryads.
It's a meta variant. Greatly resembles the standard nobilis species. Yeah, they're basically, for people who might not know, they're kind of like half. Here, they state that they're elves, half elf, half like deer, and
Well, they could take on various different characteristics of their environment, I'd imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure where you've seen the deer thing.
I'm remembering in my head what they look like. I don't really know. Nobilis. What is the nobilis subspecies? Let's see. What
I think that's just elves. Homo sapiens nobilis is the name for elves.
Oh, just kidding.
They tend to be more slender, fair-haired, a little shorter. It doesn't really say much beyond that physically, other than I think they probably tend to have unusual colored skin, or they tend to stay away from highly polluted areas, except for this one.
so tragic.
Yeah.
They're not half deer people. That's like, I think I'm thinking of dryads in World of Warcraft or something.
I'm trying to see if it says anything about them having to be female.
Let's see. It says by Amazon, as they take care of resident dryad children and any pregnant females. No, they don't have to only be female.
Okay. Maybe that's just a rumor that I ran across then. So look at the racial traits. They have glamour, low light vision, and symbiosis. I think the symbiosis power is going to be kind of like stripped away or twisted in some way. Maybe the village was all dryads or mostly dryads.
Could be.
Let's see. They basically have similar stats to elves, except for a little bit lower strength. And the glamour power, what does that do?
Glamour. A character with glamour is paranaturally gifted so that all sapient beings perceive him as moving with unearthly grace. His countenance always seems radiant, and his voice is soul-wrenching and laden with emotion. Basically, they add 2 to their social limit and +1 dice pool modifier to social skill tests, with the exception of intimidation.
And they get distinctive style. Because they're just so pretty. Style. Okay. I love the idea of the glamour. Johnson. Also, kind of layering over, so that if that glamour were to fall down, they would maybe have like all these nasty sores and other signs of their toxic nature that they just can't avoid having picked up from their twisted remains of their symbiosis, maybe.
Yeah, definitely.
But they look pretty, unless you pierce that veil. All right. Yes, Kareth, you say you have a male dryad in your group, so... Yep, I think whatever female dryad thing might have been an old edition thing. Palmer, that makes sense to me. So, yeah, we've got a Doom Toxic Dryad Blood Mage. I think the blood magic thing is something they would have picked up after they went Toxic, maybe. What do you think? I don't think it fits the profile unless we think of it that way.
Yeah, I'm wondering... Yeah, there's... I mean, I guess you could rationalize how it might be a tribe that practice, but I don't see a dryad being that unless they were crazy, so that fits after the fact if we still want to stick with that.
I like the idea of complicating the toxic thing with it being a blood mage as well. I think it's a nice touch, especially with the whole vengeance against as technology. You know, one of the first things they did was hunt down and kill a bunch of Azzies and then, maybe captured one that was a blood mage and tortured them to learn the secrets.
Brilliant.
I should probably write that down somewhere, huh? Personal details, main goal.
It's being recorded.
Yes. This one's part of a tribe in Amazonia, hunted down Azzies after and tortured a blood mage into teaching the secret. And they've been using that to get to to get to blood mages. I guess they're basically going to be the main goal. Again, they want to kill everybody. Well, I guess the Doom thing, their mentor spirit wants to influence them to kill everybody. But the blood mages themselves, this character, he or she, they really focus their attention toward vengeance against Az technology, but they don't see how their other actions just result in killing all sorts of other people around them too.
Yeah.
And their magic mentor influence is just turning them further and further along the path of just, being a horrible mass slaughtering monster. Okay.
I like it.
We've got a nice picture. Why don't we pick a gender? We take a gender from the chat. First one to pop up.
First one to pop up. We could do in the future. We should toy around with it. There's ways we can actually instigate clickable voting.
Oh yeah. Kind of like the stuff. They got a similar thing built in. Okay, Kareth, you were first here with male, so it is a male dryad. Oh, no, the game, Divinity Original Sin 2. They've got this Game Master mode built in, and one of the things you can do is have this pop-up thing come in and, you see this, what do you do? And several options, and everybody can kind of click to vote, and then it tells the GM more or less what the consensus was or where the voting went from the people in the crew. That'd be fun to be able to just incorporate in a stream like this.
Yes, it would.
Okay, so we have a male Toxic Dryad of Death and Vengeance. Main techniques. One is explosions. They like to set off bombs, preferably bombs that also deliver toxins.
Ooh. Poison bombs.
Yeah, or they like to blow up stuff that's going to cause toxic results. Like a chemical treatment plant thing in just such a way that it will result in a cloud of toxic gas that might threaten a residential area. Things like that.
Yeah. Yes. See, that's another thing when designing. So we've spent a good bit of describing who this person is. We got a clear picture of it's a dryad that used to live in, a village of dryads in Amazonia. And then during the Amazonian War, they were, their whole village and everyone they knew and loved and their family and friends and everybody's dead. They were sole survivor, and it drove them crazy. And they were seduced by by Doom, the toxic tradition of Doom, to get vengeance on Amazonia. We have this picture of who this person is, right? But now you got to start thinking about, and this helps to start thinking about this is why I thought of it, because you just said that. What are their tactics? What is their MO? How do they perceive the world, and how do they go about doing the things that they're doing? Because this is going to inform the types of runs that you send your team on to either go against them or for them, if you want it to go that way, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think one idea that I just had that might be fun is that one of their main techniques is to hire Shadowrunners to go do something or sabotage something, but there's always some extra twist in what they do that makes things go extra nasty. So she's not upfront with the Shadowrunners that she's trying to cause a big toxic spill or whatever.
Yes, of course.
And she might even have a spirit or something ride herd on them and just kind of keep watching from the side to do or deliver or influence some task in a way that makes it much more dangerous for the Shadowrunners and bad for their reputation.
I like that.
Now, the problem with an idea like this is that the Johnson is going to get the reputation for this. So either they're just getting started in the area or they do things in such a way as it doesn't come back on them. Oh, what is their source of cash for hiring? His source of cash for hiring runners. So, yeah. To hire runners, you need money. So that's a very good point.
Question. It's a good question. Well, so when we're creating a nemesis, the idea is that this person's going to be around for a little while, right? And that could be another way to interact, another way to involve your Shadowrun, your players, is maybe they've got like a side hustle going on that they need the Shadowrunners for in order to generate income. I don't know what that would be, but I just go ahead.
Yeah, and then the Shadowrun thing would be that they don't do runs all the time where they screw people over or do big toxic stuff. Those are particularly important, bigger operations that they would save for the runners who get things done the best. But of course, any runner who pulls off one of those jobs cannot be allowed to survive the experience. So they don't just kill off every runner team that they hire and use for a job, because that would be obvious. They don't just have runners go and do toxic stuff all the time, because that would be obvious. Most of what they hire runners for is information gathering or setup or doing things that might lead to this in subtle ways, but also maybe just help make money.
Yeah. So how can you in Amazonia make money to...
Well, I'm picturing this character not being in Amazonia anymore.
Oh, okay.
It's going to be wherever the player characters are. It's
right, okay. It makes sense. They're taking the fight to Amazonia or as technology somehow.
Yeah, and as technology is all over the world.
Right, exactly.
So Kareth was suggesting drugs. Yeah, Malakin sell drugs. Drugs, yeah. I would say someone who's got toxic stuff would make drugs and would occasionally make sure that some of them would be fatal to imbibe. Awakened drugs make sense. This person would have a unique connection to magical stuff and knowledge about awakened plants from their time in Amazonia.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's perfect.
So yeah, tainted drugs, but only some of them. Some of them are actually not terribly tainted, or I don't know. So they make money by selling drugs and doing the business that's involved in selling drugs and producing drugs, which involves all sorts of other activities, as anyone who's watched Breaking Bad can attest to.
Exactly. That's what I was just realizing, is that the drugs thing is actually kind of perfect because it makes it so there's so many more interesting, multifaceted ways that your players can interact with this person and not necessarily immediately find out what their secret motivation is, you know? Because if you want to have a good nemesis, like when we say nemesis, we're not talking about just like a one-off villain. We're talking about presumably someone who's going to be a recurring character, hopefully.
Yeah, probably worthy of a campaign arc.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to have ways that they can interact with that person and not immediately necessarily be tipped off. And if you tip them off too early, there's always that group of players who are just going to go ahead and take care of the problem and thus all of your plans,
All right, so for the social connections, I think we can start fleshing some of those out now that we know that this person is a drug manufacturer. What sort of people would they be connected to? Drug dealers, that's kind of obvious. Organized crime. Let's have our crew maybe pick what organized crime element is this person, if not allied with, at least has established some favorable association to help move their product. We've got the Yakuza and the Mafia are the two kind of biggest ones. Vori, the Russian style. There's the Solpa Rings, Korean-based organized crime. There's racial-based.
Are we going organized crime? Is what you're
gangs.
saying?
I could think of bigger gangs as well. I mean, there's always things like the cartels. The cartels, I don't think, are as likely to be allied with this person because they're likely to be very much. Well, as technology, okay, and Asset Land, that was basically made out of a bunch of drug cartel people. Oh, ghost cartels.
Sure. So the reason I'm asking is give me a bunch of choices and we can experiment with this poll thing that I set up in the stream while you were talking. So we've got crimes/gangs. We've got the Yakuza, the Vori. What else?
We had ghost cartels and Lyra. Oh, I have to say I can't think of what that term means. Is that like an elvish thing? It sounds elvish.
Sounds elvish.
I will Google it. Lyra on Wikipedia. I don't think that's the right one. I should say Lyra and Shadowrun in my Google search.
Sounded like you were looking it up on Wikipedia. I'm sure.
That's one of the things that came up first, actually. Gosh, I don't see any details on here. Yeah, most of these aren't English. Well, can you?
Unless you're talking about the Lesa.
Oh, maybe it was just a typo. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, the Lesa, which are creepy elf organized crime. Usually, I think right out of the tier, they do a lot of smuggling and.
Yeah, they actually do. It's my understanding that they do dabble a little bit in awakened drugs, so that could make sense.
That would totally make sense. So I love that idea.
All right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna limit it to 4 things here: Yakuza, Vori, Ghost Cartels, and the Lesa. I'm going to.
Oh yeah, doing the poll.
I'm going to start the poll here, and if you guys should see it pop up on your screen or a little icon that you can click on and vote, and we'll see if this works. If not, we'll go with something else. So while we're collecting votes on that, is there another thing that we could when you're trying to insert these people into a campaign, Cliff, how do you like to introduce a villain? Are you someone who likes to throw them in a big way first, or do you like to inject them subtly at the beginning?
Gosh, it's different every time. I mean, some of my best villains were just our best Nemesis type characters were villains that were meant for a particular adventure, and they did particularly well. Like the Blood Mage that nearly wiped out. Basically, we almost had a TPK with the actual play group. I sort of imagined what that character was doing in time behind the scenes, and they had a connection to the player characters because they were involved in the fall of his career, and he could potentially redeem himself by acquiring Tiny and turning him in, and wreaking vengeance upon the team. So I guess the point of a Nemesis, they become directly and personally motivated to make things unpleasant, very, very unpleasant for the runners.
Yeah.
So how does that happen? You got to think about that. If it doesn't happen organically through, through doing a run and having an NPC survive and have a vendetta, you have to carefully think about how you're going to introduce that, and it's going to require essentially a player character to more or less take the bait. So I think you have to pick on somebody. You have to pick on somebody from your crew. Maybe we should figure out who we're picking on in a Shadowrun group here. We should probably leave it general enough so it's fairly useful to people. Maybe pick an archetype. So let's decide which archetype or general type of character is going to be the one that is going to draw this Nemesis to become a Nemesis or Nemesis.
Yeah,
I'm all self-conscious about how I say the word Nemesis now. Thanks, Bobby.
Well, we got 3 people that voted, and all 3 of them voted on Ghost Cartels, by the way.
Ghost Cartels. They were the ones responsible for tempo. I don't really know much about them beyond that.
Yeah, the Karoth Catlatis, I'm having trouble reading names here in the chat room, said that you were having trouble with the poll that we did in the chat. I think there's a time limit. It'll pop up in the middle of your screen with a little thing with the question, and you have a time limit before it goes away. There's like a little bar that goes down. So it's possible that you missed it, or maybe you just didn't see it. I guess you sometimes have to have extensions enabled, and some people are saying it might not work on the mobile app. So anyway, it was an experiment. But everyone did like Ghost Cartels that voted on that. So
All right, I'm going to grab a link so you can view the document.
yeah, I meant to actually link that again for everybody who might have been joining a little bit later.
I'll just paste it in the chat now. Okay, so I guess the Street Sam is probably going to be the one who's going to draw the more direct ire of this Nemesis. But I think we've got a pretty good idea to about how we can introduce the players by having this person be Fixer or Johnson for them for a job or two. Maybe something where they hire him for a normal job that goes fairly well early on, and another one a little bit early on after some other runs in between that also goes reasonably well. And then after they've established more or less that they can do runs, the Johnson then hires them to do the big nasty job that seems just like one of the other ones but will result in some potentially nasty toxic fallout, and in which case also the Nemesis will arrange to have the players killed in an explosion of some kind.
Excellent.
And thank you, Palmer, for the info on the Ghost Cartels. They're South American competitors to the Oro Consortium, so that would make sense for him to have ties to. I'm still automatically thinking this character's female because of Dryad.
Yeah. And Oro, for those tuning in who might not be aware, Oro is basically the cartel that eventually became as technology many decades in Shadowrun's history.
Okay. Yeah, perhaps even her ties to the his ties to the Ghost Cartels might have had something to do with why the Azis hit their village as well. I could imagine a Dryad village would be producing interesting awakened things. But that's probably not likely to come up at all. Most of the information about your Nemesis is not going to come through to the player characters unless you make it really, really obvious. That's something I've certainly noticed.
Yeah, now, as we're slowly building this person and the people surrounding this person and all that is good to throw out tips about how to use them and how they're going to be interacting with your players. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. Too many times in my history GMing, I've come up with these Nemesis type characters, these big bads that I had all these ideas for, and I wanted the players to slowly learn about on their own by investigating and discovering things. And typically it doesn't happen. I mean, you really kind of, in a lot of ways, I've learned, as much as you don't want to, I find it really just works to be often heavy-handed with chunks of information that you want them to find out, you know? If you try to be subtle, the risk of doing that is that they're not going to pick up on it. And it's not because your players are dumb, it's just because this is just the way it is. As a GM, what seems obvious to you is almost never obvious to your players. So yeah,
I've certainly found that to be true as well. There's even been stuff where I thought I spelled it out super clear, and just people weren't picking up on the thing that they were supposed to. Hey, there it is, right in front of you. I'm handing it to you right now, and it still doesn't seem like they could pick up on it. And they're all really smart and intelligent really good role players as well. It happens if you just can't be terribly subtle, or any subtlety that does arise will happen through your role play. Of course, it's good to have the subtle details in your mind. They will influence how you make choices on behalf of your NPCs or the things that they do and when you're role-playing them. So it's not like it's not worth bringing any subtlety in, but try not to get too married to the idea that your player characters are going to learn every little detail unless you make it really obvious.
Right, exactly. And I always like that idea that Karoth is giving again in the chat room. Says maybe the group gets saved by another NPC at some point. They can give them some info. I've done that plenty of times before. That's always an easy vehicle for that. Karoth, also, I wanted to notice you said up there Dryads wouldn't normally work with drugs since that would hurt them. That's true, but maybe, I don't know if you've been here the whole time. This is not a normal Dryad. This is a Toxic Blood Dryad.
Toxic Blood Mage Dryad, yes.
So this one...
Twisted, tragic, and horrible.
Exactly.
So, let's see here. What should we do next? Let's think about minions. Honestly, this character really seems like a loner to me. Like, they wouldn't care about anyone. If they did have people that they did brought close, they would be bringing them close to use them up in some way.
And maybe that's where Shadowrunners come in. You know, they don't have like a gang, because I think you're right. This person doesn't have like a gang or a following that they could use. So they're going to need to outsource, you know, and to do the things that they need to do.
I like the idea that one of the things that they do is they're good contact with some assassins because the Dryad can make some nasty poisons. And perhaps there's one particular assassin that our Nemesis uses when he needs to put down a runner team.
Ooh, I like that. Because that, the immediate thought that I had in terms of mechanics of a campaign and storytelling and stuff like that, that presents the possibility for a really good, challenging encounter for your team at some point. Maybe I always like to think about these things as sort of like I don't know, like story arcs in a television show or something. You're going to want to get to that point where you have multiple kind of hills that they go over, and eventually it could build up to this person who's out to get them, and they beat them, and it's a very satisfying conclusion. Hopefully they beat them, and it's a very satisfying conclusion. They're able to beat this assassin, but then it's like, now, holy cow, who sent this assassin after us? And now the team has a whole new motivation to find out more information that could eventually lead to learning more about this person who maybe has hired them in the past.
Yeah, certainly. Also, the other thing I think about is it's probably best in most cases, unless you're ready for the arc to end, for you to have the Nemesis take their action against the players via indirect action rather than direct action.
Yes, exactly. Something I've learned, never put your Nemesis right in front of your players unless A, they have no idea who they are and will not know who they are, or B, you're ready for them to die. Because Shadowrun is a lethal game, but that lethality goes both ways. So,
and as far as Burning Edge goes, you can always do that, but it seems cheesy every time if you just make them get away because they burned Edge.
Yes.
Usually there's going to be a corpse that they're going to be able to kill again and again if they have to anyway, but...
Yeah, that's why that's why I say never put them in front of your players unless you're prepared for them to die, because I feel like big bad guys like that don't steal the kill from your players. That can be very unsatisfying for them, and make them feel like they don't have any control over what's happening, and it can. I've seen it ruin things before in campaigns and stuff. You know, it really kind of. You steal the buy-in that your players had once you do that. Yeah.
Oh, I do like the idea from Interpretive Chaos that this person has local free toxic spirits. So that gives you plenty of opportunities to throw challenging combat encounters at the player characters without it having to be the Nemesis itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I've maybe I didn't think about that because I almost felt like maybe I thought it was, whenever I think of toxic mages or toxic shamans, I always think of having like an army of toxic spirits at their
Right?
beck also. So
Why
yes,
wouldn't they?
absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
I love the idea that this person has this ally spirit that had gone toxic and helped kind of tip and drag them through, but also ultimately help them survive the poisoning. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
this spirit kind of goes around and gets to know and talks to and recruits the toxic spirits in the area for him, and then he can kind of meet with them and seal a deal and make various different pacts and agreements. So I think, local free toxic spirits are fun. The toxic ally spirit for a minion, and then one particular assassin. Um, Sounds good. So we've got a pretty clear picture then of how they're going to be involved with the group. This is going to be a Johnson that's going to hire the team for several runs. And
Yeah.
maybe the third run, maybe the fourth. I don't know. Somewhere around there. It's going to go very bad. The run will involve, I don't know, some sort of location that has something that, if damaged too badly or released, it would release toxins into the area. And the player characters are sent there to muss it up in such a nasty way that the area will become toxic and lots of people will die. Things will become poisoned, and Doom will feel all warm and fuzzy. I'm speaking of the Mentor Spirit, of course.
Yeah.
On this particular run, an assassin will be hired to kill the runners off once they've achieved their objectives, and may have backup with a toxic spirit or two. That will be essentially, unless the player characters somehow pick up on that this danger is coming, that will be the first sign that this is an enemy and not a helpful contact.
Right.
I don't see any reason to particularly obscure any ideas that player characters might get about this person being potentially nasty and evil, but I think it's also best to do your best as a GM to keep things secret until the big reveal. Now, one thing you're going to have to be careful about, though, is this situation could very easily be a TPK, and you probably don't want it to be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's an important point that you make there. And it's a question that you're going to have to ask yourself when you're building a nemesis of any kind is how is information control. How do you, and maybe this delves more into the topic of how to manage a campaign in general, but I do agree that you do have to consider that, how are they going to be fed this information, and are you as a GM going to want to protect some of that information, or are you not worried about that? And this person I do see, since it's almost so cut and dry, that if they're not hiring them at the beginning for obliquely or not obliquely, but for obviously evil things. So it's fun to have the big reveal, but if they somehow get suspicious and do some digging and end up finding stuff out, I don't see that as being a huge problem, because that just makes it so that they get to the fun part faster, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I'm having trouble doing the scrolling with this Google Doc here.
Sometimes it's difficult.
So you might want to follow along with that link. Does anyone still need the link for the Google Doc?
Yeah,
we can see everything we're typing in this.
I'll go ahead and post it in there just in case. There's the link to the Google Doc that we're using that you guys can follow along with, and see what there's sometimes that there's difficulties in making it scroll. So on the screen.
I'm kind of thinking that, okay, it's dangerous as a GM to have a particular plan in mind of how you think the plot is going to unfold, because it never does quite go that way, any way you might anticipate. And
Right.
that's a good thing, actually. It's what I love about role-playing games. And one of the biggest things I love about role-playing games. But that means it's dangerous to get ideas in your head about how things are going to go down. That said, I love the idea of things turning out in such a way as where the assassin is taken out, but they're able to be questioned, and reveals the full extent of the treachery, perhaps. Like that they were hired to off them, and then maybe while there's a horrible toxic explosion going on and their reputation is in tatters, and some
Right.
at least one or more people have been taken out by a couple of sniper bullets or something. I like the idea of it being a nasty fight where characters lose things, drones are destroyed, maybe even someone has to burn an edge, but I want them to win more or less and get away, not end up in jail, and I want them to find out somehow that for sure this Johnson is their enemy now.
Yeah.
And it's a nemesis because our Dryad is not going to let this go. It can't allow these people to continue and be alive. They are going to be very, very motivated to make sure that those characters die.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good way. Again, I was just talking about like information control, and that's that gives that assassin a double purpose, which makes it great as an encounter. To challenging encounter that serves a purpose in the end of revealing some information and making a shift in your campaign. Everything has to pivot in a way.
Yeah, and after that, it more or less becomes this cat and mouse game as the player characters are trying to maybe track down the Nemesis to end things, or maybe they're trying to go about their lives and do other runs while toxic spirits are showing up at a certain time, or the assassin is, or not the assassin, but maybe another assassin is sent after them, or the whole bulk of the schemes and plots of this person, this toxic blood magic Dryad, gradually starts skewing away from just going after as technology to making sure that these people die.
Yeah, I really like the cleanness of this setup. Right, it's easy to manage as a GM, and there's so many things that you have to manage when you're running a campaign that it's nice when you can have an easy to manage thing. So. And what I mean by that is the way we've built this toxic blood mage Dryad is that they're just trying to make money so that they can fulfill their goal of taking it to as technology, right? So the runners are able to just take simple jobs, and you as the GM get to reveal things in a very controlled way at your own pace, which is what would culminate in this assassin thing. And then after the fact, I love having fail safes, right? So you would hope that your runners, your players, would be motivated to find out who this is and take it to them, so that they can not be hunted down by this person, or so that they can take care of the problem that this Dryad has made for them. But you've already demonstrated that they are wanting to send an assassin after the team. So if the team decides that they don't feel like following up and they just go back to doing jobs, then every once in a while you send another assassin at them, and it lets them know this isn't going away.
Right. Okay, so I'm just bringing up a Hero Lab here. I'm not sure how it's showing up.
You got super quiet on me all of a sudden.
I did? Oh. Okay.
Yep.
I don't know why. That's strange. Yeah, my levels are much lower. Let me try this. Oh, there we go.
You go. Yep.
Yay! All right, so I've been bringing up Hero Lab here. It's not showing up
Hero
properly.
Lab. It always comes to Hero Lab.
I figured it was time for us to start doing some stats.
Yeah, for those of you watching who don't use Hero Lab, of course, Hero Lab is a character generator that's for a lot of systems, but Shadowrun, if you don't use Hero Lab, then because it's a paid program, like you have to pay for it. But Chummer is another one that is free if you want to use that.
Yeah, I've got Hero Lab and all the licenses for it. It was fragging expensive. but it's also pretty much worth it. What I love about Hero Lab over Chummer is that Hero Lab is properly licensed, so they can actually put in the texts of all the things. So you don't have to go digging through the books to remember what this or that does. It's really handy to have all the information there in one place. And I think, is this, can you guys read this screen at all, or is it just way too small? Because it looks pretty small on the OBS screen here, but I don't know if it looks better on the Twitch broadcast.
It's pretty small, but
All right. Well, I'll leave it as is for now. We can zoom into certain things as we need to. Actually, maybe I should just zoom into something. How do I do that? Sorry, I'm not terribly used to this thing. I just resize. Oh, yep. If I resize it like this, but it's off the screen. Okay, I think that'll help a bit. So, yep, I've got Hero Lab up here, and I will say, yes, Chummer is awesome. I love Chummer. I've used it before. Its output is really nice. You can kind of choose different ways it's going to display the information. I do like Hero Lab better. Now, within Hero Lab, I'm going to create the character as an NPC, not using the created as PC, because I just want to make up whatever stats I feel like putting in there and not have to worry about whether it fits with character generation rules. So, Heritage, I can pick meta type. Dryad is right there. It's got all the info for me. It'll put that in there. Select magic. I think we're going to go with, should we go with Full Magician or Mystic Adept? Mystic Adept gives us some Adept powers to play with, but he can't astrally project. Full Magician gives us the option of the Toxic Magician being able to project from their body to basically lead strike forces of spirits against targets, potentially.
Yeah, it looks like people are saying mage in the chat room.
Okay, regular magician, not a mystic adept. Now let's go with some stats. Let's assume this character is someone who would more or less have the equivalent of several hundred karma under their belt, so they're going to be pretty powerful. Body, I think we can go with a relatively low for that, though, maybe a 3 even, just because the smaller, more frail stature. Strength, maybe a 2, or well, maybe we can go with 3. This is a Dryad that works out. Agility is going to be important. Maybe not so much for this character, actually. There's not too many agility skills that are going to be useful. Reaction, we're going to make that to be decent because it's a defense pool thing. I think where this character is going to really shine is going to be their mental stats. What I'm seeing is this character is going to have definitely going to have some face tendencies because they're acting as a fixer. Maybe backing it up with some of their magic spells and powers. Certainly the glamour helps with that, but there's also other spells that might help in being a better Johnson. So I think charisma is going to have to be really, really high.
I think so.
Let's just max that out.
There's a certain, proclivity towards doom that they have that they're going to have to overcome with other skills.
All right, so we've got willpower. I'll max that out too because that's important. Logic and intuition, they should be pretty high, but maybe not maxed out. Or should we just give her an intuition of 6 too?
Why not? Well, that raises a question that I was just thinking of asking you. Is in my experience, I always find it really difficult to generate an NPC just like throw the stats on. Is there a rule of thumb you use for just assigning stats to an NPC? I always feel like I have to go through like the actual full generation process, or I don't know what I'm doing.
No, I kind of just make up stuff that makes sense to me and give them the stats that I feel like giving them. I guess if I'm worrying about challenge levels, then I might temper that. But often enough, I mean, you probably can't make an NPC survivable enough to live through a combat turn against your player characters. And you, when you're running things, you have some idea of what their capabilities are. Like, right, I've got Maverick to deal with, and Hayes and Kit, and like they're all super high level karma characters. Or, for the campaign that I've been running for some patrons taking place in Vlad Vostok, I came up with a character that's supposed to assassinate, and I made her really, really tough. I just gave her. I figured she's got. A character like this, you might want to think of what they've had access to as far as other things. I don't think we're going to give them lots and lots of expensive gear because that just doesn't make sense. But they have really good stats. I mean, they're the only one who survived this toxic attack long enough to be courted by the toxic spirit of doom and survive. So they're going to be exceptional in some ways, and you want them to be tough. So I think anything that's important for what their main stuff is, you should just go ahead and max it out. Or put it really high. Anything else, give them like around average or maybe even a slightly above average. Like if I were making this character myself, if I were a player character, I'd be super tempted to go with the strength of 1 because really, what is this character you use strength for? But I can give the NPC a strength of 3, and that makes him a little bit more meaty, I guess. Oh, thank you.
Eric DeMage says he dropped in saying he's playing Shadowrun right now, so he can't stay. He's just dropped in to give us some bits. Thanks, man. Thanks. You guys, it's a good opportunity to let people know if you're watching that you can throw cheers at us. We get excited about it. So thanks, Eric. But yeah, one thing that I've learned over the years GMing is that I'm sort of a mathy person, and I always worry about balance, right? But I've learned that especially when you're making larger, tougher characters, NPCs like a Nemesis, a big bad, or something like that, I think it's always best to err on the side of way too high stats, because you want this guy to stick around for a while, first of all. And second of all, it's much easier, really mechanically, but also much easier, like ethically and on your conscience to stage things down if you're seeing that it's too hard, rather than to just bump things up because they're like going, your players are tearing through them like paper. So
yeah, certainly, and. You don't have to be accountable. I don't have to tell you where he came up with the karma to get his charisma up to 8, or however many initiative grades we're going to throw, and we just throw the numbers down. It might help. I think when you're more of a beginner GM, it does help to go through the character creation process and then maybe add stuff onto that. But once you get a little bit more familiarity with things, I think it's way more fun to just go through and pick the stats.
Yeah, Amarda in the chat room did give kind of a range if you ever want to think about this. If you're the type of person, GM, who likes to think about these things, says like 1 to 3. I think he's talking about dice pools. 1 to 3 dice is like just some bum off the street. 3 to 6 is low level in terms of skill. 6 to 9 dice pool is, like a proficient cop level. 9 to 12 is professionals, and 12 to 15 being someone who's really good at what they do.
I think what you mean by rule 3 then is like every 3 dice worth is like a new tier. Is that what I'm getting at?
Sounds like it, yeah.
I do something more that I think of like a rule of 12. Anybody who's generally going to be competent and good at something is going to roll 12 dice at it. So if I don't have stats down, I need to whip something out, just 12 dice. If I want them to be nastier, I give them more than 12 dice. If I want them to be less competent, I take away some of those dice. But it's a good idea to have some sort of just quick rule of thumb way to throw out some numbers in Shadowrun, because if you have to stop and generate every NPC in detail that you run across, the game is not built for that to be feasible.
Yeah. And balance in NPCs and challenges and encounters could be really a whole nother topic. It's quite an involved kind of thing to think about. It's quite a rabbit hole you can go down. But I think this person just needs to be really good at what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm going through and adding a bunch of skills that are useful. I like to use skill groups to save time when I'm generating NPCs like this. It just, rather than adding, the banishing and the binding and the summoning skills separately, maybe I wouldn't bother with banishing for most characters because it's a waste of time. You're better off just killing the spirit with bullets or something.
Yeah. Karath asks, yes, he's asking, he's got to head out. Is there going to be a recording available? Yes, this will end up on our YouTube channel, the Shadowcasters Network YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube and search for Shadowcasters Network. It's there. It'll be there. And thanks for sticking around. And
thank you.
Thanks for suggestions. I know we took at least one or two of yours.
And essentially for the skills, I'm just adding some essentials here. We've got perception and sneaking. I added a couple of skill groups for face skills, the influence and acting groups. Then I added all the magic skill groups and a sensing and astral combat. Is there any other skill besides those core things that we think we should include on this?
Demolitions.
Oh, yes. Demolitions, of course.
And while we're going through some of these mechanics of actually building the NPC, guys, we're here to build something with you and share our ideas and everything. But feel free to ask questions if you have questions. We're the whole thing should also be, we should have said that at the beginning. Q&A is definitely something that we want to help you with if you have any questions. So,
all right, so. I've added the demolition skill. I also figured chemistry that's a skill you use for making drugs in Shadowrun, so that's going to be important as well. I think that's all we need to worry about. This character may well have some more minor skills here and there, like maybe some first aid or medicine or throwing weapons, but we don't even have to worry so much about those. These are the ones that we're going to be falling back on and using the most. Feel free to, as the GM, just decide that an NPC that didn't have a skill before suddenly has a point or two in it, if it makes sense and doesn't seem too obvious that you're cheating. I will never admit to having done that ever, by the way.
Amarta asks, so what's your take on using grunts, enemies that go down after one hit? I use them all the time. I mean, let's be honest, guys. In Shadowrun, how many... It's not even fair to say that to define them as grunts that go down. Like, so many things in Shadowrun go down with just one hit, right?
Right. Well, the way grunts are, I guess the rules as written for grunts is that they're not necessarily one-hit kills, but you don't worry about their separate physical and stun track. Just all damage goes to the same track. You pick the highest of the two that they would have, and they go down faster. I do that sometimes, but I more often try to represent the characters fully with their own stats. The other aspect of grunts is that they have a professional rating instead of edge. So basically, like, you pick their professional rating of like 2 or 3 or whatever, and that's like an edge pool that all of the grunts in that entire encounter have access to. They don't each have that amount of edge, so that does make them a little bit less immediately dangerous. I've used that more often than I've used the combined condition monitor idea.
Mm-hmm. Lord K makes a good point, which is it kind of segues to what I was going to follow up with. Is he says it's that they're great for Pink Mohawk, and that's true, because what I was going to say is I've done before, and I like using grunts specifically grunts that'll go down after one hit when I want to send a bunch of people, like just this big, like, exciting, dramatic encounter when there's just like, like, oh, you guys are getting attacked by a mob of 15 or 20 different people, and they can just be, just dudes that one hit is going to take them out, But it's still a fun challenge and exciting challenge for people your players to have to deal with, It's a fun thing to do. To answer the question more directly, I don't have a problem with it. It all depends on what you're trying to accomplish. In the story, right?
Yeah, I think it's something we've both used to one degree or another. But yeah, the rules as written one, I think, having just one go down after one hit, that makes a lot of sense to me, actually. If you're gonna go one step to just say, I'm just gonna say all physical and stun damage fills the same one up just to make it faster and easier, why not just go all the way and say if they're hit, they just go down? So
Yeah, exactly.
it's a good idea. That said, I almost always just run things with the stats as they would fall. So the stun damage is separate from the physical, and I roll the dice and see if the person goes down. And I guess I just don't typically do that. Veer away from that very often. All right, so I put some skills in here then. I just went with 6s for everything important. I figured 9 for the conjuring and sorcery group because this person's been a badass mage for a while, right?
Heck
And
yeah.
as much as I want to put like the 6 in perception and sneaking or whatever, like those, I can't just go. I feel like I have to put some things in that aren't a 6 or higher. So I figured intimidation, perception, and sneaking were things that made sense for this person to be good at. Dice pool of 12 or 10 or 9 or whatever, but not like their main stuff.
Yeah, well, even the glamour on the Dryad even supports that with intimidation. It specifically says that they're great at all the social skills are amazing except for intimidation. It calls it out specifically.
Okay, so we go over to knowledge skills. I'm not even going to pick any. If I do pick a knowledge skill, I put small unit tactics in because that might be a combat skill that might come into play. Otherwise, I don't bother messing with any of those. Knowledge skills are typically useful things for players to gather information with, and therefore is not terribly important for me to deal with putting energy in when I'm making the NPC. What do you think, Bobby?
Knowledge skills, I think for someone like this, it can be useful as a reminder for you as a GM of what they might be. What I am always asking myself while I'm doing any part of a character creation for any type of NPC, whether it be grunt or contact or some villain of some sort, is am I ever going to need to roll this? Because if I'm not, then there's no point in statting it, right? The only point of having stats for me is so that I know what to roll.
And as I guess from my perspective, the only thing that I could think of being useful for having the knowledge skills down for an NPC is it's almost like a collection of tags that you could look at and see what, just get some other information about them. So
Yes,
I could see arguing for having a knowledge skill you're never going to roll, but that tells you something about the character. And why don't we pick one from that? That'd be a good audience suggestion thing. Let's get a knowledge skill from the audience, except for Avenzi, because we don't care what he says.
Oh gosh, Avenzi. Damien's in the chat. Everybody,
Right.
It's over. We're all done.
Let's pick some knowledge skill that tells us something interesting about the character that we haven't already covered by all the stuff we talked about already. Something new, some other little twist.
Yep. That's good. While we're thinking about that, while we're getting suggestions from the chat, I did see a question from Palmer up before in relation to what we were talking about with grunts. He says, if they only have one track, how do you know if they're left alive or super dead after the run? And my answer to that is, I mean, it's up to you, right? It's one track. So if you want them to be alive, if you have a reason for them to be alive, then one of them got left alive.
I would say more often than. Sorry.
Also, sometimes it's going to be obvious if the way that their single track got filled up is by a chainsaw to the face or neck, then maybe they are dead.
That's pretty much exactly how I run it. If it's a horrific, deadly injury, then they're dead. If it's not, they're probably able to be stabilized or maybe just unconscious.
Right.
And if the characters intervene to stabilize them and save their lives, then they might live another day. But who really cares about whether they live or die, except as if the players care?
To me, and a lot of this again is going to depend on you as a GM, what your style is and what your preference is. But I can only speak from what mine are, and that is, to me, it's always story first. So. Or narrative first or story first, however you want to call it. So to me, if an NPC being alive serves the story, then I just make it happen. Unless it would be too stupid, like like 5 NPCs that were inside a shipping container and they got blown up by C4 inside there. Like Chunky Salsa is going to take care of it. No one's left alive in there. But
we got
we got some suggestions.
Yeah, I think there were a couple native music. I like the weird magical critters like mythology, but what was the other one? Uses music like a centering skill. I think that's lovely. The Dryad will have maybe a beautiful voice or an instrument. They already have a performance skill because I gave them that.
What is that thing called? Like a lyre or something?
Maybe like a flute.
Yes, like a pan flute. But maybe that's not very toxic and bloody.
I almost like the idea of just singing. Has this weird, sweet, haunting voice.
Oh yeah, very creepy.
And yeah, knowledge about critters, magical critters. That's good. We'll add that in.
Oh, the singing too. That can be one of those little like what do you call it? One of those triggery type things that ways for you to there's a term I'm looking for, but it's like every time you as a GM want to hint that this person is around or something like that, you describe the singing,
Awesome.
Or if you want to as a GM, you sing yourself. Thanks, Sea Monster, for the bits.
The nihilistic philosophy, interpretive chaos, that would be a good suggestion for most blood toxic magicians, but I think that's below or outside of this character's awareness of their psyche, right? I think this person isn't necessarily an overall nihilist, but they really want everything to do with as technology to die. What they don't know is that deep down they're motivated by full nihilism, but I don't think they're consciously aware of that. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think I understand what you're saying, that this person really you envision having like a very single-minded focus and motivation.
And they maybe see themselves as like a vengeful force of good, right? They're not the bad guys. As technology, they're the bad guys.
Right. I know where I see where they're coming from with the nihilism idea, because we definitely talked about this early on, this idea that in order to bring justice to the world, everyone has to be destroyed. Like I get that.
I just don't see this character having gone far enough to see that and be honest about themselves.
Yeah, I think just the focus that we've had with this person so far, they feel a lot more driven to me, in a more like twisted justice kind of way.
Yeah, like after they do a bunch of toxic stuff and a whole bunch of as technologies burning, if they lived long enough to achieve their goals, I'm like, yeah, maybe I will just kill off everybody else. That makes sense. But
yeah, and Malakon in the chat room says something that is always something that I always think about, is that everyone's always the hero of their own story. So yes. even the really terrible bad guys,
All right, so we've got a bunch of skills picked out. We've got a couple of knowledge skills to throw in to make things interesting. Someone's mentioned the centering ability, so of course we're going to add the meta magics here then. Oh, that's right. In Hero Lab, to add the meta magic, I have to end the character creation and add it through the Advances tab. So let's just go ahead and go with Initiate grade, because here's something. There's bounties out for blood mages and toxic magicians. If you just see them and sense them, you'll know their aura is twisted and awful and evil, and you get a whole bunch of new by geeking them and dragging their body in. So any blood or toxic magician that is going to be around long enough to be a nemesis is going to have some grades in initiation and some meta magic abilities that help keep them from being exposed.
Oh, no doubt. That is really key when you're dealing with this type of a magical threat. For those who listen to the actual play that I just wrapped up, one of their big nemesis was someone who happened to be a Shadim, and I didn't want them to discover that too early, because that's kind of, like, the cat's out of the bag at that point, right? So absolutely, one of the first things I did was initiate that villain and give them the masking meta magic at like 1,000,000 power.
And here's the thing too, as a GM, I'm gonna talk dirty here. We have initiate grade. I'm going to pick save 4, so I give them some meta magic powers, but they've got masking. That means they roll their magic rating plus their initiate grade to oppose the sensing tests, and if a PC pierces through with net hits, they might notice the creepy stuff underneath, right?
Sure.
They never have to know what dice came up on your test to oppose them on their sensing. If you don't want them, if you're not ready for them to find out yet, you can feel free to just frag and cheat all you want, unless they're burn edge on the test. If they are so motivated to find out the secret that they burn edge on their test, just let them have it. Give them the whole thing. This is a Toxic Blood Mage Dryad. Go for it. Roll for initiative. But if it's less than that and you're not ready, feel free to cheat on the roll. And of course, I have never actually done this in practice, but it could be a very useful tool.
Another thing is that pay attention to those net hits on the sensing test, right? You don't have to give them all the information if they succeeded. In fact, using my example again, the mage in our group, who actually was Mr. Johnson here, he was playing Elric, the mage in the group, did sense this guy, and did get a couple of net hits because he did really well. But you have to get a certain level in order to find all that information, right? So pay attention to what those are. And it happened to be low enough that I was able to just kind of feed a little bit of information, say, things look a little fishy. You could definitely tell that they're it's a magically active person, but there's this, and you just describe it very subtly and in a you don't have to give it all. Pay attention to the number of hits is what I'm saying. Yeah, it's another way to, again, trickle information to your players if they are successful there, because you should reward their curiosity if you can, Yeah,
I would say so too. You don't want to be the person like, nope, you don't get anything, or just be adversarial about them getting stuff. If you're going to cheat them, it must be subtle, and they must never know until you are in the grave. Okay.
Right.
And I mean you personally in real life. They don't get to find out ever unless you're dead. You can leave it in your will and have it read off. And the one time we played in this campaign, remember that time that you faced that? Oh, I'm going to totally write up a will like that someday, maybe. Of course, no, I would have nothing to reveal, though, so there wouldn't be any point to it.
Right. Nothing at all.
No, nothing at all. So... Gosh, here. Yes, blood magic does require meta magic in the first place. Good point, Palmer. To be a blood mage, you have to have blood, or the sacrifice is the name of the meta magic. So we have sacrifice, we have masking, we have centering. I'm making this a grade 4 initiative. What else can we do? Flexible signature can be fun. They could cast a spell and leave behind someone else's magical signature. Maybe they could use that to frag with the PCs down the road as the vendetta goes on. That's always fun. But what about anyone else? Let's have another meta magic. Oh, wait. We have to pick another one for toxic as well, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
So we have a toxic, blood magic, masking, and centering. And centering, of course, as long as this person can sing, they get extra dice on their drain, letting them cast higher force stuff. So... All right, yeah, I'm not seeing any other suggestions for meta magic. I think we can move on from that. And they're not entered in here yet because I have to wait till we do other stuff. But qualities is something I don't spend a lot of time on with NPCs, even a lot of detailed ones. I'll typically go in and add a couple for a detailed NPC like this, though. But just the ones that I'm interested in having influence the game.
Whenever I have a magical... Nemesis of some type, even just like tough grunts, I am really quick to give them the focus concentration all over the place,
Oh, yeah.
because that just makes my life easier in making their lives harder.
Yeah, it's less bookkeeping for one.
Yeah.
Because just they got the spell, so let's give them focus concentration 6, because what the frag. It's
Yeah.
not like we have not like we're going to run out of karma.
Oh,
But let's
to be a
other
GM.
qualities from the audience here. What other qualities should we give him, positive or negative? I think. Oh, you're right. For the ally spirit, they need a meta magic for that. Isn't it invocation that they need, or is it just ally spirit is a particular meta magic? I might be.
Let's see, ally spirit. I'm looking it up.
Oh, driven. Yes, that's perfect. I love it because it tells us something about the character at a glance. That's the negative qualities, and I was going to positive. Excellent suggestion there from Palmer. A ritual contract. Is that a quality? I'm not familiar with that one. This is something I love about Hero Labs. You can just search through the lists of stuff. Like, in this case, I'm searching for a contract. I don't see something there. I think this person would potentially have some spirit pacts, which actually that would be a ritual magic you'd have to have.
I don't think I'm looking very briefly at ally spirits in Street Grimoire, and I don't think it requires a special meta magic to have an ally spirit. You just have to have a formula for the ally spirit.
Okay.
And a lot of karma.
Yes. Lots of karma.
Or you can undertake a metaplanar quest.
I think Interpretive Chaos is still saying invocation. I think he might be right on that. He or she, actually. I shouldn't assume a gender on Interpretive Chaos. Corruption metamagic. What's that one? Is that where you can pollute astral space? I think we're going to need a couple more initiate grades. Why not? I mean, it's not like it adds a huge amount of power. It just makes the masking work better, right? And the centering, so this character's never going to take drain or reveal their secrets.
Yeah.
All right, and I typed in the quality for driven in the text field, Doom of as technology. I think this, being a dryad, we're going to skip augmentations altogether. Even after going toxic, I think the idea of getting any implants would be just disgusting to this character. What do you think?
Absolutely.
So
I agree with you.
We'll skip the cyber bio and gene wear. Weapons.
It doesn't make
need to be
sense as a
concerned.
dryad to have had any kind of augmentation before
Right.
their life as a toxic anyway.
Yeah, then into the other magic stuff, we need to decide, I guess, spells and rituals and formulas. For rituals, obviously, she has the one for ally conjuration. I don't know that there are any other terrible ones to be important. Maybe wards are always handy. Summon Great Form Spirit, because Great Form Blood Spirits.
Oh, yeah.
Other than that, I guess I want to mention something about my attitude towards picking spells for NPCs. I might pick like a few here and there that might be ones that they are their go-to spells, but for the most part, I don't worry about picking every single one. And if I feel like casting a spell that isn't on the character sheet, I just go for it.
Yeah, I've heard you say this before, Cliff, and I'd never thought about it before, but I think that is a really good suggestion for GMs is don't think too hard. Use the spell list in the character generator or on the sheet as like a reminder for the couple of spells that you want to make sure that they have and that they use that you might forget about, but otherwise just whatever.
But, I'm going to need to step away from the computer for just a minute here. Maybe you can think of something to discuss with them for suggestions of what spells this person should have and use on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I will do that. So to continue on with what I was saying and what we were just implying, like the NPC to me has the spells that you need them to have in the moment, but it is worthwhile to pick a couple. And again, I'm buying time here for you guys to help me come up with some spells, but it is worthwhile to pick some that you want to make sure that you use and that you remember that they have that is likely to be forgotten. I see one suggestion is hemorrhage. I think that implies another thing that I was thinking about, which is that a good thing to do with this person in particular is maybe we should make sure that we have some spells specific to blood or toxic traditions, right? Because those are the ones that you're not going to use very often, and those are the fun ones that you want to make sure that you do get a chance to use, right? Hemorrhage, is that a spell or is that I'm looking for it and I'm not sure that I see it in the thing, but we do have things like corpse explosion is so fun. Doesn't it sound like like, shouldn't you just have that? Remember that this person has the abilities that they have, blood and toxic, because the reason that they have the toxic abilities is because they were visited by Doom, the spirit of Doom, and they were seduced by it in order to get this accomplish their goal of vengeance that they were trying to accomplish because of what happened to them during the war, right? And so that's the reason that they have that. They probably have spells that are in the toxic tradition because of, just to help accomplish their I guess what I'm saying is there's probably more freedom in picking the toxic ones. Just the blood ones probably aren't as many. It hasn't been practicing the blood tradition as long as the toxic one. So,
There are some fun ones, though.
I was already telling them that corpse explosion is one that I've always wanted to use.
No, I don't have Forbidden Arcana in Hero Lab. Have they not done that one yet, or did they just not get it yet?
I don't know. Do I have it? Let me make sure. Hero Lab just gets loaded with things that I don't even know that I'm loading it with. So.
Okay, well, we got to give him Corpse Explosion.
Absolutely. It's a no-brainer.
And maybe just that one, because, let's see, I think the things like Acid Stream and Toxic Wave make a lot of sense. They're technically like acid damage, but the chemical protection works against them, and it just fits, right?
Right, exactly.
There's also Pollutant Stream and Pollutant Wave, actually. No, I guess we'll have to pick those up, too. It's pollutant damage, not just acid damage. But I like the acid damage, too, because that damages people's armor, and that makes player characters feel especially vulnerable. What else did we get for suggestions on spells?
Let's see. Those were the ones that we got.
Oh,
we got hemorrhage. Is hemorrhage toxic?
I think that is like a power that great form blood spirits get.
Yeah. Okay, so that was less of a suggestion and more of an exclamation of delight.
And I think we probably don't need to worry about alchemy, except for it might be fun to have the character occasionally leave behind an alchemical trap, maybe, but I don't know. I guess with the bombing, though, I mean, there is that new quality called, it's out of Forbidden Arcana. Where are we here? Pulling up the book here since I don't have it in Hero Lab. A Magic Mastery quality. which are new qualities that you can buy for your magical characters that don't cost double. Yeah, Alchemical Bomb Maker. You need Alchemy 4 with combat specialization and advanced alchemy metamagic. And it increases the radius or base DV of alchemical preparations that basically do damage. And you can increase damage or radius at the cost of increasing the drain cost for this. So I love this as like, this gives us a really good way to work in that last final run. The player characters are delivering something that is an alchemical preparation. They don't necessarily know what it's going to do, right?
Right.
And then she triggers it off, and that's... So I think this one is really good for the narrative style of it, too. So unfortunately, I can't include it in the Hero Lab thing, but she'll have the Alchemical Bomb Maker quality. Can I add a custom quality? I can. Added custom positive quality. It's a 10-point quality. And we don't even need to worry about the stats of it so much affecting things. So I'm not going to worry about putting in modifiers to make it affect the sheet, because it's all stuff that's done behind the scenes anyway, right?
Exactly.
We're not rolling those dice in front of the player characters, even if it was, All right, so I do love that. And for alchemy, maybe we can pick whatever combat spells are appropriate at the time, but of course it's probably going to be a toxic one. Any others? I don't think we need much more for spells, but maybe any other inflict disease. Is that a spell? Disease is a different toxic tradition, though. Slayer Slaughter meta type, sure. But that's basically just like Mana Bolt, right? It's just a little bit lower drain.
I think so. I've never put that on a character. I don't know why. It feels like a weird. I've never had an NPC that I felt like it fit.
Yeah, I like the idea of some sort of interesting non-combat spell, Palmer. So something that, okay, this is a face, right? Shouldn't we have spells to?
Oh, good point.
Maybe something horribly invasive like control emotions. That seems more of a combat type almost, but even though it's not direct combat so much. But what would be a good face-related spell?
Trying to pull up the list of spells in Hero Lab, but I've always found I know we went with mage instead of adept, but I've always found the adept, the social adept powers really good.
Yeah, we went with mage instead of adept though, so we don't have access to those.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's going to be things like fashion and makeover, but we don't even have to put those down because they're behind the scenes. We can just assume those are going on, right?
Right.
Something that might come up.
So more like manipulation type stuff, right? Well, not manipulation spells, but... Well,
I don't even want to bother writing down improved invisibility because that's almost a given as well, right?
Right. You could convince is a good one.
Convince. I've never used that one. Let's take a look at that on Hero Lab here. It makes it harder for a subject to detect inconsistencies in any story told to them. I love it. It's subtle. Yes, let's do that. That's a nice flavor. So, convince is something that has helped this person build their network of disposable consumables. By that I mean people that they use.
Yeah.
And we'll assume that this person has way more spells that are on the character sheet. I do want to add one more with a ritual here. Just to throw in much further down the road when this NPC is very frustrated with not being able to kill them and gets a little bit more desperate and overt. And that is the Prodigal Spell, which will allow him to cast, say, Pollutant Wave from somewhere far away. And then you have this Pollutant Wave spell traveling through physical space, moving around walls and objects to strike the team and explode on them. The only way to get away from it would be to, say, get inside of a building, so it would have to hit a wall or something that it couldn't just find a way to weave through. If there were any openings, the spell would seep through before it hit and detonated.
Oh my gosh.
I just love that way of just ruining someone's day.
You heard it here first. Mr. Johnson loves ruining people's days.
All right. Yeah, lots of other good suggestions. Double image, alter memory, area thought recognition. Rewind I'm not as familiar with. Shadow. Yeah, let's assume any of those are ones that this person could easily have. But I don't think we need to bother putting anything else on the character sheet, though. Do you, Bobby?
No, I don't. If you're aware, again, what I was saying before is, and what you were implying, the character sheet for spells is just a place to kind of like note the spells that you want to make sure that you remember so that you will use,
Right. I'm looking through here. I'm thinking of, what about foci? Should we have an interesting focus for the character? It would make sense for a grade 6 initiate to have a focus. Power focus seems a little crazy over the top. I'd rather have something to have more of a specific use. We've got a centering focus, would give them even more dice to resist drain. A different summoning foci maybe, or a spell focus that helps with a particular spell of type.
Let's see.
I don't have anything specific in mind, but
I like foci for enemies to be somehow either very thematically linked to what and who they are, or maybe to be a clue to their past or their motivations.
Oh yeah, there's a blood magic focus. There's the Athame, or Thame, or I'm always pronouncing it wrong.
It's Athama, I think, is how it's pronounced.
And which is, of course, a horridly twisted representation of the actual religious tool in real life, which I think is perfectly telling for a blood magic person. So yeah, this allows them to store the blood magic points so they don't have to kill someone immediately and use the power. So I think that's the perfect idea for focus. How could I just not have automatically put that down? So what is this person's? It's an athame or whatever. It's a dagger or knife or cutting implement of some kind. What kind of cutter is it? From a poison tree from the village? Maybe that could be part of the hilt.
Yeah, I like that.
Or you're right. It's wooden, and it's been manipulated in some way through magic so that it's hard as part of the enchantment process. That it actually is hard as steel, but it's a wooden blade that imagine it would have this blood-soaked look to it.
Yes, I like that.
Okay, so we've got the wooden athame and someone mentioned a banishing focus. That could be very useful. But I also don't like banishing. It's always so risky, and the NPC ends up just killing themselves trying it.
Yeah.
So, All right, so we've got our wooden athame. Let's see, where do I add that in for foci? I think I have to pick something. So I'm going to add a melee weapon. That's just a knife. And I can customize it by adding an enchantment. Now this is adding, trying to add a preparation. I thought I could make this into a focus with this setting here. But all I'm seeing are spells. It's under modification.
It could be, yeah. Let's see.
Weapon focus is there, and there's Athame. Yep, it's grayed out because I have to know sacrifice meta magic, and I don't know that yet because I have to do that through the character advancement tab. So let's just go with a rating 6 because we can.
Do what we want.
Oh, and I somehow managed to cancel out that entire process that I just did. I'm not super fluent with Hero Lab here, but okay, there we go. Add. Okay, there I click close, and it's all right. So we've got that lovely knife, and we haven't actually picked any combat skills besides astral combat. That someone who had mentioned that they were asking about that. I think that makes sense for this character, right? They've got spells to kill people with. I doubt they would consider using their knife for much beyond. Well, it is going to be important to cut people though who don't want to be cut. So we've got to have a blade skill.
Absolutely.
And it's got to be pretty high. So blades, like 8. And if it actually comes up to trying to use this against player characters, this NPC is screwed. Just thought I'd point that out. They're probably not going to be stabbing a player character with their wooden Athame unless you're really trying to make a point, or that's just like their last possible action.
Yeah.
And I imagine the Athame is something that they keep hidden away in secret, maybe even not on their person, because it would give them away.
Yeah, they certainly wouldn't be carrying it around every day to, meet with the runners that they're hiring or anything like that, I would imagine.
Well, oh my gosh, time totally flew. We have like 5 minutes left. So,
well, what extra bits of information do we need to make sure that we hit before we wrap up?
I guess we don't even have time to even think about making up an ally spirit. So a really quick and easy way to do that is just to pop up a spirit of the force that you want and give it more freedom.
Right.
I honestly haven't looked a lot into the rules for the spirits too much, so that's something I'd want to dig into more. But we should think of the ally spirits are rarely heavy hitters. So an ally spirit is more often going to be doing things like astral scouting, spotting for ritual magic, and going around and doing stuff that isn't necessarily direct intervention in combat. If we're sending toxic spirits after the player characters, chances are it's not the ally spirit that's going. Right.
And you wouldn't want to. I mean, as a player, you wouldn't want to. It makes sense. You wouldn't want to send your ally spirit out because that it's like expensive, right?
Yeah, and
you wouldn't want him to be being confrontational, is what I mean.
Right, and so I think summoning and binding toxic spirits and sending them after the PCs is a great source of minions, as well as those other free toxic spirits. Just if you need to, you can just pop open just a spirit, give it the force that you want, and call it the toxic spirit, free spirit, without worrying too much about all the other potential powers. You could do that on the fly pretty easily. The other stuff is gear. We didn't talk about much. The matrix stuff. Most characters are going to have some sort of interesting matrix object to keep their stuff safe. This character I don't see is terribly tech savvy, actually. I mean, they're going to have to make phone calls and things, but I don't think they would actually store any information in electronic form that could be hacked. They'd want to remember it themselves, maybe.
Yeah,
so,
and that could actually be one of the quirks of the NPC that to make them more interesting and memorable to your players is that maybe they rarely do anything except for have to call people. You could point that out.
Right. They don't have much of a social life. Any social interaction they're doing is a way to get a lever on someone to get their job done, to ultimately kill people.
Yeah, like Amarta says in the chat room, a real paper notebook. Like this person came from a village, is a dryad from a village in Amazonia. So yeah.
All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and click Save on this Hero Lab file and put it in a Google Drive and share the link for all of you so you can go ahead and customize this Toxic Blood Dryad to your heart's content.
Yeah, if anything, we maybe didn't get to dig real deep. It can take a long time to make these things, and we spent a lot of time talking about what I think are the important details, which is who this person is and how they might interact.
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out the most important part of this process was not the stat generation.
Yeah.
Actually, that was the last thing that we did almost as an afterthought to the whole process.
As long as you as the GM know who this is, what their motivations are, why they are doing what they're doing, why they would need or be in opposition to the player characters, or both, at different points in time or at the same time. As long as you know those things, then you can do things with it. And as we've kind of hinted at, or maybe even explicitly said already, the stats for these guys are almost kind of an afterthought or just an inspiration for you.
And I almost see the final confrontation with this character as being fairly anticlimactic and unsatisfying from a combat standpoint. They're not going to be a hugely powerful combatant. They'll probably throw off a spell or two. As a GM, I'd say maybe burn an edge to get a powerful spell through to deal some damage here and there, but they're going to get piled on and killed once they finally get caught. Actually catching this person and trapping them into having to face you is essentially what you have to do. Once you've done that, you've won, basically. But that in and of itself should be very difficult.
We had a request from Lord K and Sea Monster in the chat room for a PDF copy. Maybe you could export to a PDF and put that in there as well.
I guess I'm slightly concerned about copyright with that, because Hero Lab has all the licenses. But if I do a PDF output, that's got a bunch of copyrighted material from Catalyst. That's why I haven't. That's why I'm specifically sharing it in a Hero Lab form. It might be okay to do it, but I'm really nervous about that kind of stuff. So
yeah, that's a good
I'm
point.
sorry.
Yeah, we try to be careful about that, just so that there's funniness that we have to deal with.
You might be able to download a demo or open Hero Lab in demo mode and print out the output. I'm not sure what you can do with the demo version, but yeah, for copyright reasons though, I'm afraid I'm too nervous to share the PDF output.
Yeah, exactly. It makes sense.
But I've got the link for the Hero Lab file.
Mm-hmm.
I've just got to find the right place to paste it. So many tabs. Okay. Here we go. So there's the link for that. I'll post the link one more time for the kind of brainstorming document we've been working with. You're welcome to use that in your game.
And again, the document, the Google Drive, the brainstorming document that we came up with, that's really the important details. Palmer, by the way, in the chat room says that if he might use this in one of his play-by-post campaign, and if he works it up in Chummer, he'll post a link in the Discord. And if you guys aren't aware of the Discord, you should check that out. Go to shadowcasters.network/Discord, and you can get a link to our. It's a pretty amazingly huge Shadowrun Discord server. So.
And also, as far as the Arcology podcast goes, we love getting story times in. So especially if you've used something from this and things turn out a certain way, we'd love to hear that, and we'd be happy to read it on the air. Oh,
yeah, that would be cool.
We haven't gotten a story time in a while, so yeah, you guys should send us some. Just contact at arcologypodcast.com. We should probably talk real quick, even though we're over time now, about some stuff that's coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me.
But first of all, I just want to say thank you all for coming to this. It's great to have all of you to help us put these ideas together.
Yes, 100%. This has been really fun. This is the second time we've done it, and the whole point of these things is not so much, we give tips and tricks and stuff like that for game mastering, but one of the things we thought of was there's not a lot of like that we're aware of Twitch streams where you've got people that just get down and show how to get your hands dirty in doing this stuff. You can get all the tips and everything, but sometimes it's still intimidating, and you can see the process and even participate in the process with us. We've got a lot of stuff coming up, most of which is Shadowrun related. If you're going to be around tomorrow, for example, the 15th of November, Damien, who I guess might still be around here. I think I can smell him. Haha, just kidding. Yeah,
all the way from Canada.
Yeah, all the way from Canada. He's been playing through the old retro Shadowrun games. I think he had a little hiccup last week, but he says he says I hate you in the chat room. Yes, I hate you too, sir. But he's playing through the Sega Genesis version of Shadowrun. If you wanna tune in for that, that's tomorrow at 8 p.m. We've also got the Sixth World podcast on Thursday. There's all sorts of stuff. Cliff, you're going to be playing with. Are you still doing family game night?
Yeah, a week from today, I'm going to be doing a stream with my daughter. We're going to be playing like a shared screen co-op, really difficult platformer game called Cuphead together, and maybe some other game if we get bored with that one. But yeah, for a couple hours, I'm going to be chilling out with my 10-year-old daughter, who you all know as Mini Vox Real on here on Twitch.
Yeah, I love it when she pops in on all of our different shows. She just pops in, and I think she's great. I'm excited for the family game night thing because many of us here, the Shadowcasters, many of us are family people, and we've got kids, so I'm really excited to get to share that part of our fun. On the stream here. One thing that I definitely need to make sure to plug is on the 27th of November is Join the Anarchy's Season 1 finale. They just started the first half of their finale last night, and Mr. Johnson was a part of that.
That was fun, yeah.
As well as Vox. They were both a part of that. And it's been over a year, their Shadowrun Anarchy campaign that they've been doing on Twitch every other week in a sort of improv style, whose line is it anyway style, where they take suggestions from the chat room, and you guys who are listening and get a chance to win something by making suggestions for them to play with. And they're bringing this long. Oz is amazing. He's been keeping track of this long story arc over the whole year plus, and it's finally coming to a conclusion. Lots of guests who have appeared on the show in the past are coming back. That's why Mr. Johnson and Vox have been there, and it's this big epic finale that they're going to be doing, which is finally going to be coming to a conclusion on November 27th. So if you are a fan of Join the Anarchy, please make sure you watch that. And if you have never heard of Join the Anarchy, you really should go back and listen to all of their stuff. If you go to YouTube and look up Join the Anarchy Shadowrun, you should be able to find it on their YouTube channel. And we got lots of other stuff going on. I could go on and on about all that, but I don't want to keep you guys here. We've gone over time just a little bit. So if you want to see everything that we're doing, you can go to shadowcasters.network/schedule is where our November stream schedule is located. If you're listening live, you can also click right down below. There is a tiny little image of the schedule. Click on that and it'll take you to the website, and you can see a bigger version of it. Thank you guys so much. If you are enjoying what we're doing and you're not following the Shadowcasters Network Twitch channel, you should click that follow button. You'll get notifications every time we go live and join in and the fun that we're doing. It's not always Shadowrun related, but it often is, and we're bringing more stuff to you all the time.
And I should mention one way to support us monetarily without having it actually cost you any more money than what you're already spending on something else is if you have an Amazon Prime membership and haven't used this up yet, you can subscribe to any Twitch channel for free, and that's like giving us $5 a month, I think.
Yep,
or
it
$4
is.
or something.
It's and it really helps us out. So a lot of people who are Amazon Prime members aren't aware that they have that option.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got $5 a month to toss towards a subscription, awesome, amazing. We love that. But if you've got that Prime membership, you have a freebie one you can toss our way that won't cost you anything.
Yep, and we would really appreciate it. So what we really, though, appreciate more than anything is you just coming and hanging out with us, because that's just awesome. So thank you guys for doing that. And yeah.
I think with that, we'll say good night.
Good night, everybody.